It was one of those mornings that felt like every other, quiet, gray, and slightly cold. The city was just waking up with people hurrying to work, faces buried in their phones or hidden behind steaming cups of coffee. The air carried that mix of bus fumes and fresh bakery bread that made mornings feel strangely alive. She walked the same path she took every day to the bus stop, lost in her usual thoughts about deadlines, groceries, and the long list of things waiting for her attention. But that morning, something caught her eye. Near the corner of the old convenience store, sitting on a worn-out bench, was a man she hadn't seen before. He looked older than his years, with rough hands and eyes that seemed tired but calm. His clothes were neat in their own way, though faded, and beside him sat a small bag that looked like it carried everything he owned. People passed him without even turning their heads. He didn't beg or speak. He just sat there quietly, watching the street as if he was waiting for someone who had forgotten him long ago. For a brief moment, their eyes met. She quickly looked away, pretending to check her phone, but something about his expression stayed with her. It wasn't just sadness, it was a kind of quiet acceptance, like he had stopped expecting kindness from anyone. She told herself not to think about it. People come and go. Life is busy. Everyone has their own problems. Still, even after she reached her office, the image of that man sitting alone wouldn't leave her mind. She tried to focus on her work, typing reports and answering calls, but every now and then, his face would appear in her thoughts. Around lunchtime, she found herself staring out the window, wondering if he was still sitting there. She felt strange for caring, after all he was a stranger. But sometimes the smallest things stir something in your heart without warning. The next morning, she took the same route again. Her eyes naturally searched the corner, though she told herself she wasn't really looking. And there he was, in the exact same spot, quietly sitting as the world rushed past him. Something about seeing him there again made her heart feel heavy. She walked closer this time. Her bus hadn't arrived yet, and she still had a few minutes to spare. She noticed his hands trembling slightly as he held a small cup of coffee, probably bought from a cheap vending machine nearby. The wind blew gently, making the cup shake. She hesitated, debating whether to say something. "Good morning," she said softly. He looked up, surprised, as if he hadn't heard those words in a long time. His voice was quiet but polite when he replied, "Morning." She smiled, unsure what to say next, and then the bus arrived. Without thinking, she got on, leaving him behind again. But this time, guilt followed her the entire ride. That night, she couldn't sleep well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that man sitting alone, surrounded by people who acted like he didn't exist. She thought about how easy it was for the world to overlook someone just because they didn't fit in anymore. The next day, she made up her mind. She woke up a little earlier, packed her lunch, and then added an extra sandwich and a bottle of water. She wrapped it carefully, feeling a little nervous about what she was planning to do. When she reached the bus stop, he was there again. Same spot, same calm posture. She walked over, her heart beating faster than it should have. "Hi," she said with a friendly smile. "I noticed you here every morning. I brought some extra food today. Would you like some?" He looked at the package in her hand, then at her face. His eyes softened, though he seemed unsure. "That's kind of you," he said slowly. "But I don't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble," she insisted gently. "I made too much anyway." For a second, he hesitated, then accepted it. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled a little shyly and said, "You're welcome. I hope you like it." She didn't stay long, just a few minutes before her bus came, but as she left, she noticed a faint smile on his face. And somehow that made her day brighter. From that morning on, something changed. Each day she brought an extra meal and shared it with him. At first they exchanged only a few words, a polite greeting, a quiet thank you. But slowly he began to open up. One morning, while they sat together, he told her he used to work at a small repair shop nearby. He had a steady job, a small apartment, and a life that, while simple, was peaceful. But a few years ago, everything began to fall apart. His health declined, the shop closed down, and the bills started piling up. With no family close by and no savings, he eventually lost everything. She listened quietly, not interrupting, not judging. There was no need for pity. He didn't ask for any. He just wanted someone to listen. "You must think I'm foolish," he said once with a half smile. She shook her head. "No, not at all. Life can be unfair sometimes, but it doesn't make you foolish. That made him look at her differently, as if her words had touched a part of him that had been asleep for a long time. Days turned into weeks, and their small conversations became the highlight of her mornings. She started to notice little things, how his eyes brightened when they talked, how he always said thank you as if it truly meant something. He even started bringing her small tokens of gratitude, like a flower he found or a coin he polished clean. One morning she noticed he wasn't at the bus stop. The bench looked empty without him. She felt an unexpected worry, glancing around as if he might appear from somewhere, but he didn't. All day she kept wondering where he had gone, realizing how much his presence had started to matter. The next day, he was back. His smile was tired but genuine. "Sorry I wasn't here yesterday," he said quietly. "I wasn't feeling well." She felt relieved, though she didn't want to show it too much. "I'm glad you're okay," she replied softly. He nodded, looking down at the sandwich she handed him. "You know," he said after a pause, "people walk by every day. Some look, most don't, but you stopped. You talked. You shared. That's something I didn't think people did anymore." She didn't know how to answer that, so she just smiled and said, "Maybe the world still has some kindness left. You just have to notice it," he laughed quietly. "Maybe you're right." As days passed, she realized how different she felt. Life hadn't changed drastically. She still had the same job, the same responsibilities. But something inside her had shifted. Helping someone, even in such a small way, made her mornings feel meaningful. It reminded her that kindness didn't have to be big or loud. It could be simple, like sharing a meal or a moment of understanding. And for him, those moments seemed to bring back a spark that life had taken away. He started standing a little straighter, speaking a little more, and even making plans again. Once he mentioned wanting to find work again, maybe part-time. She offered to help him look for opportunities, and though he seemed shy about it, he didn't say no. There was something peaceful about their bond. It wasn't built on pity or charity. It was built on humanity. Two strangers who met by chance, both filling a quiet emptiness in each other's lives. One morning, as she waited for her bus, she saw a woman glance at the man and smile at him before walking away. It was a small thing, but it made her realize that others had started noticing him too. Maybe kindness really was contagious. When her bus came that day, she waved at him and he waved back. The simple exchange filled her heart with warmth. She didn't know what the future would bring or if their paths would continue to cross. But she knew this much. Listening to her heart that first morning had been the right thing to do. Sometimes, the smallest decision to stop, to notice, to care can change more than just one life. It can change how you see the world itself. The days slowly turned into weeks, and their morning routine became something she looked forward to without even realizing it. It wasn't just about giving him food anymore. It was about the quiet moments they shared before the bus arrived, the small smiles, and the gentle conversations that made both their mornings a little lighter. Every day she noticed something new about him. Some mornings he looked a little more rested, other days more tired, but he always greeted her with a small, polite smile. His eyes had started to change too. They weren't as distant as before. There was a spark of hope in them now, something that had been missing when she first saw him on that bench. One morning, after handing him the food, she sat down beside him for the first time. The bench felt cold, but the sun was slowly rising behind the tall buildings, painting the sky a soft orange. The city noise hadn't fully started yet. There was still a calmness that felt rare in her busy life. He looked a little surprised to see her sit down. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly. "I know," she replied with a smile. "But I want to." For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. Then he took a small sip of his coffee and said, "It's strange, isn't it? People pass by and they don't see me. I've been sitting here for months and you're the only one who ever stopped." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe people see you, but they don't know how to approach. Sometimes kindness starts with courage," he smiled faintly. "You must be braver than most then." She laughed softly. "Not brave, just human." He nodded, and for the first time she saw the hint of a real smile on his face, small but honest. Over the next few days, their talks grew longer. He told her little pieces of his story, not everything at once, just small bits that came naturally. He had once worked as a mechanic in a small workshop not far from where they met. He liked fixing things, bicycles, watches, small machines. Anything that needed a gentle hand, he said. But then the workshop closed and the owner left town. At first he thought he'd find another job easily, but time passed and opportunities grew fewer. "It's strange," he told her one morning. "When you stop having a place to be every day, time starts to lose meaning." She listened quietly, her heart heavy with empathy. She wanted to say something comforting, but sometimes silence was more powerful than words. One evening, while she was preparing dinner at home, she found herself thinking about him again. She wondered how someone like him could just vanish from society's eyes. It wasn't right. He wasn't asking for money or attention, just a little respect, a little kindness. The next morning, she packed not just food, but also an old jacket her brother had left behind. It was warm and clean, barely used. She folded it neatly and carried it with her. When she reached the bus stop, he was already there, sitting in his usual spot. His hands were tucked into his sleeves, trying to stay warm against the morning chill. "I brought you something," she said, holding out the jacket. He looked at it, then at her, clearly moved but hesitant. "I can't take that." "It looks new." "It's not," she said quickly. "It's just sitting in my closet, doing nothing. You'll make better use of it." He hesitated for a long moment before taking it. "Thank you," he said quietly. "No one's given me a gift in a long time." "It's not a gift," she said gently. "It's just something to keep you warm." He smiled, carefully folding the jacket over his arm. "You know," he said, "you remind me of my daughter. She was like that too, always helping others, even when she had little herself." Her heart sank a little. "Your daughter?" He nodded slowly, looking down. "We lost touch years ago. After her mother passed, things fell apart. I wasn't in a good place back then, and she had her own life to manage. I think she tried to reach out once, but I wasn't ready, and then I just stopped trying." The pain in his voice was quiet but deep. She didn't ask more. She just placed a hand gently on his arm and said, "Maybe it's not too late to try again someday." He didn't answer, but the way he looked away told her that part of him wished that could be true. As time went on, their conversations started to fill with small laughter. He told her stories from his younger days, about fixing old radios, his first job, and funny encounters with customers. She shared her own little struggles, how work was stressful, how city life often felt lonely, and how she missed having genuine conversations with people. It was strange, but the bench became their small world, a place where two completely different lives met and somehow made sense together. One morning, as she approached the stop, she noticed that his hair looked cleaner and shorter. He had shaved too. There was something different about him, something hopeful. "You look good today," she said, smiling. He chuckled shyly. "A man at the corner barber shop offered me a free trim, said I looked like I needed a fresh start. Maybe people are starting to see me again." "That's wonderful," she said, genuinely happy for him. "You deserve to be seen." He looked thoughtful for a moment. "You know, it's strange how one act of kindness can change how you see yourself." I started sitting up straighter. I started smiling at people again. Maybe it's silly, but I feel human again. "It's not silly at all," she said softly. "That's what kindness does. It reminds us who we are." From that day on, he began taking small steps toward rebuilding his life. She helped him write a simple resume, though he felt embarrassed at first. "I don't even have a proper address," he said. "Doesn't matter," she told him. "We'll figure it out," and they did. With her help, he applied to a few local shops. Weeks passed without replies, but neither of them lost hope. Every morning she encouraged him, and every day he seemed a little more determined. One morning he arrived at the bench with a spark in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "I got an interview," he said, smiling widely. She almost dropped her coffee in surprise. "That's amazing. When?" "Tomorrow morning," he said. "It's for a part-time job at a warehouse. Not much, but it's something." "That's not much," she said. "That's the start of something." He nodded, his eyes shining. "I couldn't have done it without you," she shook her head. "You did it yourself. I just reminded you of what was already there." That day she went to work feeling lighter than she had in a long time. She couldn't explain it, but helping him had made her see life differently. It wasn't about money or success anymore. It was about connection, about being human. The next morning, she arrived earlier than usual, hoping to see him before his interview. When she reached the bench, he was already there, wearing the jacket she'd given him and holding a small folder with his papers. He looked nervous but excited. "You'll do great," she told him. "Just be yourself." He smiled, clutching the folder tightly. "I'll try. Thank you for everything." When he walked away, she felt a strange mix of pride and sadness, like watching someone take their first step into a new world. She hoped the interview would go well, but more than that, she hoped life would finally give him the peace he deserved. That evening, as she walked home, she passed by the bench again. It was empty this time, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like a symbol of hope, of second chances, of the quiet power of kindness. She smiled to herself, realizing something she hadn't understood before. Sometimes following your heart doesn't just help someone else, it helps you rediscover a part of yourself you didn't know was missing. She no longer walked past people without seeing them. She started noticing things she used to ignore: the tired vendor on the corner, the old woman carrying heavy bags, the young man sweeping the street before dawn. The world hadn't changed, but her way of seeing it had, and it all began because one morning she decided to stop and care. The next morning felt different. The air was fresh, the sky was bright, and she found herself walking a little faster than usual. She didn't want to be late to the bus stop. She wanted to see if he got the job. When she turned the corner, her heart lifted. He was there, not sitting on the bench this time, but standing near it, holding a small paper bag in his hand. His smile was wide, brighter than she had ever seen. "I got it," he said as soon as he saw her. His voice was full of life. "They hired me," she laughed, clapping her hands together. "That's amazing. I knew you would. It's just part-time for now," he said. "But it's something. They said if things go well, they'll give me more hours." "That's a big step," she said warmly. "I'm so happy for you." He looked at the paper bag in his hands and said, "I brought you breakfast today. Thought it was my turn to share something." She was surprised, touched, and smiled. Inside the bag was a small sandwich and a cup of coffee. It wasn't perfect, but it was made with care. She took it gratefully, and for the first time they sat together on that bench as equals. As they ate, he talked about how nervous he had been before the interview, how he almost didn't go. "But then I thought of you," he said. "You believed in me when no one else did. I couldn't let that go to waste." His words stayed with her the whole day. She realized that what she had done for him was something simple: a little kindness, a few conversations. But for him, it meant the world. In the following weeks, his life began to shift slowly. He worked hard at his new job, sorting boxes and helping with deliveries. It wasn't easy, but he never complained. Every morning before heading to work, he stopped by the same bench just to talk to her for a few minutes. He started to look healthier, his clothes cleaner, his eyes more alive. The tiredness that once clouded his face began to fade. She could see hope returning, like sunlight breaking through clouds. One morning, he showed her a small key on a string around his neck. "I found a room," he said proudly. "It's not much, but it's mine." Her heart swelled. "You did it," she said softly. "I'm really proud of you." He nodded, his eyes shining. "You know, I used to think my life was over. I thought I had nothing left, but now I wake up and feel like maybe there's still something waiting for me." She smiled. "There's always something waiting. Sometimes we just need a little help seeing it." Their talks continued, but now they were filled with laughter instead of silence. They spoke about dreams, memories, and small joys, like the smell of rain or the sound of morning birds. It was the kind of friendship that didn't need anything fancy, just honesty and care. One afternoon, as they sat quietly, he said, "Do you ever think about how strange life is? How one small choice can change everything?" She nodded. "All the time." He looked at her, thoughtful. "If you hadn't stopped that day, I don't know where I'd be now. Maybe still sitting here, invisible to the world." "You weren't invisible," she said softly. "The world just forgot how to look." He smiled gently. "Then I guess you reminded the world, or at least me, that people still care." As days turned into weeks, others began to notice too. The shopkeeper nearby started greeting him. A few workers from the warehouse waved when they passed. It was like the world was slowly welcoming him back. One morning, when she arrived, she found him already talking with an older woman who often sold flowers nearby. He was helping her carry a heavy basket. When he saw her, he waved happily. "She gave me these," he said, holding out a small bunch of daisies. Said they were for my friend. The word friend made her smile. They're beautiful, she said, taking them gently. Thank you. He looked down shyly. You deserve them. For a moment, there was silence between them. Not awkward, but peaceful. She often wondered how many people walked past him every day, never realizing how many stories were hidden behind his quiet smile. It reminded her that every person, no matter how lost they seemed, had something worth knowing. One evening, it started to rain heavily. She stayed late at work, and by the time she reached the bus stop, the streets were nearly empty. To her surprise, he was still there, standing under a small umbrella. You didn't have to wait, she said, shivering slightly. He smiled. You always check on me. I thought I'd return the favor. She laughed softly. You're full of surprises lately. They shared the umbrella as they waited, talking about small things, the weather, his work, her long day. It felt natural, like two old friends sharing comfort in the rain. When the bus arrived, she hesitated before stepping on. You'll be okay, right? She asked. He nodded. Don't worry. I've got a roof now. I'll be fine. As the bus drove away, she looked out the window and saw him still standing there, watching the streetlights shimmer through the rain. She realized then how much both their lives had changed since the first day they met. In helping him, she had learned more about kindness, patience, and humanity than she ever expected. He had taught her something too, that people don't always need saving. Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them. A few days later, he told her something unexpected. I've been trying to find my daughter, he said, his voice quiet. I wrote her a letter. It took me weeks to find the courage, but I finally sent it. She felt a lump in her throat. That's amazing, she said gently. Do you think she'll reply? I don't know, he admitted. But even if she doesn't, at least she'll know I'm still here. That I'm trying. That's what matters, she said. You're trying, and that's brave. He smiled faintly. You make me want to try. Weeks passed, and one morning when she reached the bench, he handed her a small envelope. She wrote back, he said softly, eyes glistening. Her heart leapt. Really? What did she say? She said she's glad to hear from me. She wants to meet. His voice trembled with emotion. I don't even know what to say to her after all these years. She smiled warmly. Just say what's in your heart. That's enough, he nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. In the following days, he prepared for the meeting like it was the most important day of his life. And maybe it was. He got a new shirt, saved up for a bus ticket, and even rehearsed what he would say. She helped him practice, offering gentle advice and encouragement. The morning of his meeting, he came to the bench one last time before leaving. Wish me luck, he said, his hands trembling slightly. You don't need luck, she said with a soft smile. You have courage. That's better. He smiled back, his eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you for everything. You gave me my life back. She didn't know what to say. She simply hugged him. It was a quiet, warm hug, full of unspoken emotions. When he walked away, she stood there for a long time, watching him disappear into the crowd. For the first time, he didn't blend in. He stood tall, full of purpose. That evening, when she returned from work, she found a small note tucked under the bench. It read, Meeting went well. She cried, I cried. She said she missed me. Thank you for reminding me how to live again. She held the note close, tears filling her eyes. She smiled through them, whispering, You did it. From that day forward, she didn't see him every morning. But every time she passed that bench, she felt peace instead of sadness, because she knew that somewhere out there, a father and daughter were rebuilding something beautiful, and she knew that one simple choice in her to follow her heart had changed more lives than she could ever imagine. Sometimes, kindness doesn't end with one person. It spreads quietly, like sunlight touching everything it reaches. And though she never sought recognition, she found something far more powerful. The truth that one small act of love can heal what the world forgets. Weeks had passed since he reunited with his daughter. Life had begun to take a new shape for both of them. The morning still came the same way. The cool air, the sound of buses, people rushing by. But something inside her had changed. Every time she passed the bench where they first met, it no longer looked lonely. It looked like a reminder of hope, a place where two strangers found light again. She didn't see him every day now. Sometimes she wondered where he was, how he was doing, or if he was still working at the warehouse, but she knew deep down that he was okay. She could feel it. One sunny morning, she was waiting for her bus when a familiar voice called from behind. "Long time no see." She turned around and there he was, smiling, looking healthier than ever. His clothes were clean, his hair neatly trimmed, and his posture confident. He looked like a completely different person, not the man she'd first seen sitting quietly on that bench months ago. "I can't believe this," she said, smiling wide. "You look great." He laughed softly. "Feels strange to hear that again. I guess life's been kind to me lately." They sat on the same old bench, this time side by side, both of them relaxed and content. He told her how things were going with his daughter, how she had forgiven him, how they'd started meeting every weekend for lunch, and how he'd even met his young grandson for the first time. "She looks just like her mother," he said, his eyes soft with emotion. "And the little one?" "He's full of questions. He asked me why I don't live with them. I told him maybe one day." "That's wonderful," she said gently. "You deserve all of it." He nodded, his voice steady but full of feeling. "You know, for the longest time I thought life was done with me. But I was wrong. Turns out sometimes you just need one person to believe you still have a chance." She looked at him, smiling quietly. "Sometimes we all need that." They talked for a long time that morning. He told her about work, how he'd been promoted to a full-time position and was even training new workers now. She could hear the pride in his voice, the joy of being useful again. "I started saving a bit too," he said. "Nothing big, but enough for small things. Maybe I'll move into a better place soon." "That's progress," she said encouragingly. "Every step counts," he nodded. "You know what's funny? I used to walk past people just like me, people sitting alone, and I'd never stop. I thought maybe they were there because they wanted to be. Now I know better," she smiled. "Life has a way of teaching us empathy, doesn't it?" "Yeah," he said softly, "and now I try to help others whenever I can. There's a man who sits near the market, reminds me of myself a while back. I bring him something to eat when I can." Her heart warmed at those words. "You're doing exactly what you were meant to do." He looked down with a humble smile. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just returning what I was given." For the rest of that morning, they shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments. When the bus finally arrived, she didn't want to leave. It felt like she was saying goodbye to someone who had become part of her daily life, part of her story. Before she boarded the bus, he said, "You know, I've been thinking of writing about all this. Not for fame or anything, just to remember. Sometimes life moves so fast we forget what it took to stand again." "That's a beautiful idea," she said sincerely. "People need to hear stories like yours," he smiled. "Maybe one day I'll show it to you." The bus door closed, and as it pulled away, she waved. He stood there on the sidewalk, smiling, sunlight catching his face. Over the next few months, she didn't see him often, but every now and then she'd find small signs that he was doing well. Once she saw him across the street helping an old man carry groceries. Another time, she spotted him near the bus stop handing out sandwiches to people in need. He had become a quiet force of good, spreading the same kindness he once received. One afternoon, she found a small folded note on the bench. It read, "Life is kind again. Thank you for showing me it still could be." She smiled, carefully folding the note and placing it in her bag. It was simple, but it meant everything. As time went on, her own life began to change too. Work got busier, but somehow she managed it better. She was calmer, more patient, and more aware of the people around her. She started greeting strangers with warmth, buying small things from street vendors just to make them smile, and talking kindly to the guards and cleaners at her office. She realized that kindness didn't have to be a big act. It could be small everyday things, a smile, a word, a gesture. And every time she did something nice for someone, she remembered the man who taught her how powerful one small moment of compassion could be. Months later, one evening as she was walking home, she saw a familiar figure sitting at the same bench. It was him. He looked thoughtful, a gentle smile on his face. She walked up and sat beside him. "Fancy seeing you here again?" she said playfully. He chuckled. Old habits die hard. They talked for a while, catching up. He told her about how his daughter had invited him to move closer to her. "She says it's time we make up for lost years," he said, smiling softly. "That's amazing," she said. "You should go. I plan to," he replied. "But before I do, I wanted to see this place one more time." "It all started here." She nodded, her heart full. It did. He looked at her for a moment, his voice warm but serious. You know, you changed my life without even realizing it. You didn't judge me. You didn't walk away. You just saw me. That's something I'll never forget. Her eyes softened. You changed mine too. You reminded me what real kindness means. They sat quietly for a moment, both lost in their thoughts. The street was busy around them, but for them, the world felt still. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small worn notebook. I finished it, he said, handing it to her. What is it? She asked. The story I told you about. I wrote everything down. It's all there. How we met, what you did, how it changed me. I wanted you to have it. She looked at the notebook, touched beyond words. Thank you, she said softly. I'll take good care of it, he smiled. That's all I ask. The sun was setting, painting the sky in orange and gold. He stood up, brushed off his jacket, and looked down at the bench one last time. I guess this is goodbye, he said quietly. She stood too. Goodbye for now, she said. But somehow I don't think this is the end. He smiled, eyes glistening. Maybe not. She watched as he walked away, blending into the evening crowd, but this time, not as a man lost or forgotten, but as someone reborn. Someone who had found his place again in the world. When she finally sat back down, she opened the notebook and began to read. The words were simple, written in his careful handwriting, full of gratitude and life. He had written about his struggles, his loneliness, and how one person's kindness had given him a reason to try again. The last line read, "Sometimes angels don't have wings. They just carry a smile and a warm heart." She closed the notebook, holding it close to her chest. A tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't a sad one. It was the kind of tear that comes from deep gratitude, from knowing that a small act of love had changed two lives forever. That night, as she walked home, the city lights seemed warmer. She realized that kindness never really ends. It moves from one person to another, growing quietly, invisibly, but powerfully. And though she didn't know where he was heading, she knew one thing for sure. Wherever he went, the kindness they shared would keep spreading, touching hearts the same way it once touched theirs. Months passed after he left the city. She still took the same route to work, passing by that old bench every morning. The first few days felt a little strange, like something was missing. That spot had carried so many memories, and now, even though the streets looked the same, they felt quieter. But slowly she began to accept that life moves on, and that people we meet sometimes come only for a chapter, not the whole story. Still, she carried him in her thoughts. Not in a heavy way, but in a peaceful one, like a gentle reminder that small kindness can change the direction of a life. One afternoon, after a long day at work, she stopped by the bench again. The sun was setting and golden light stretched across the street. She sat down, feeling a soft wind brush against her face. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't in a rush. She let her mind wander. That's when she noticed someone sitting a few feet away. It was a young woman, probably in her 20s, sitting quietly with her head down. She looked tired, her clothes a little messy, and she was holding a small backpack close to her chest. Something about her reminded her of the man she once helped. The same quiet sadness, the same lost look in the eyes. For a moment she hesitated. Should she say something? Or should she leave her alone? But then she remembered. Sometimes a single word can change someone's day. So she smiled gently and said, "Are you okay? You look like you've had a long day." The young woman lifted her head, surprised that someone had noticed her. "Yeah," she said softly, "just things haven't been easy lately." She nodded, not pushing for details. "Would you like something to eat?" I was just about to grab something nearby. The girl hesitated, but then nodded slowly. "That would be nice." They walked together to a small food stall nearby. She bought 2 sandwiches and some tea, and they sat on a curb to eat. The girl spoke between small bites. She said she had just come to the city a few weeks ago looking for work, but things hadn't worked out yet. Her savings were gone, and she was struggling to find a place to stay. Listening to her, she felt a familiar ache in her heart. The story was different, but the feeling was the same. Someone trying their best but fighting a world that sometimes didn't seem to care. After a while, she said softly, "You know, I met someone once who was in a tough place too, and all they needed was someone to remind them they weren't alone. You'll find your way too." The girl looked at her with a faint smile. Do you really think so? I do, she said. Sometimes life takes us through hard roads just to show us how strong we really are. They sat there until it got dark, talking about small things, work, home, dreams, even silly stories from the past. Before they went their separate ways, she gave the girl her phone number. Call me if you need anything, she said sincerely. Even if it's just someone to talk to. The girl looked at the paper with quiet gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. Most people just walk past me. She smiled warmly. I used to do that too, but someone once showed me a better way. That night, as she walked home, she felt something stir inside her. That same warmth she'd felt the day she met him. Maybe life was bringing her full circle, giving her a chance to pass on what she'd learned. The next few days were busy, but the girl stayed in touch. They met for coffee once, and she helped her find a small part-time job at a nearby store. Slowly, the young woman began to smile more, talk more, and carry herself with hope again. It was a small act, but it mattered. And every time she saw that smile returning, she thought of the man who once said, "Sometimes you just need one person to believe you still have a chance." Weeks later, on a quiet evening, she sat by her window reading the notebook he had given her months ago. She had read it many times before, but that night it felt different. Each page was filled with honesty and gratitude. She flipped to the last page again where he had written, "Kindness doesn't end where it starts. It moves through hearts like a quiet river flowing forever." She smiled softly, closing the notebook. Outside her window, the city lights shimmered, each one a story of its own. Maybe somewhere far away he was sitting under the same kind of sky, thinking of how far he'd come. Time went on. She didn't hear from him again, but sometimes unexpected signs made her believe he was still out there doing good. Once she received a letter without a return address. Inside was a photo of a small house by a lake, and on the back a short note, "Peace found me. I hope it found you too." Her eyes welled up, but she smiled. That was all she needed to know. The next morning, she placed the photo on her desk at work. Whenever her day got stressful, she looked at it and felt calm again. It reminded her that helping one person might seem small, but it can ripple through countless lives. As the months turned into years, she became known for her kindness at work. Colleagues came to her for advice. Strangers opened up to her, and even people she barely knew said her presence made them feel lighter. She never did any of it for recognition. She did it because it felt natural now, as if compassion had become part of who she was. One rainy evening, as she left work, she saw an older man struggling to carry boxes to his car. Without a second thought, she rushed to help. As they loaded the last box, the man smiled and said, "Not many people stop to help these days." She smiled back. "Someone once helped me see that kindness never goes out of style." He laughed. "I like that." When she finally reached the bus stop, she was drenched, but she didn't mind. The rain felt soft, like a gentle reminder that the world still had beauty in it. She looked at the empty bench nearby, the same one where it all began. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, and for a moment she thought she saw a shadow sitting there, smiling faintly. It wasn't real, but in her heart it felt like he was there, not as a memory, but as a quiet presence. She sat down and whispered softly, "I hope you're happy out there." A breeze passed by, cool and light, and she smiled. It felt like an answer. That night, as she walked home, she thought about how strange and beautiful life could be. A single moment, a small act, could weave through time and connect people in ways they'd never imagine. She didn't know if she'd ever meet him again, but maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the real miracle was that two strangers had changed each other forever, and through them, the world had become just a little bit kinder. And so, she kept living, helping where she could, smiling when she didn't have to, listening when others needed to talk. She never told the story to everyone. It was something she carried quietly, like a precious secret. But sometimes, when someone would ask her why she cared so much, she'd simply say, "Because once, someone reminded me that kindness saves lives," and that was the truth. Years later, when she grew older, she still walked past that same street sometimes. The city had changed, new shops, new faces, but the old bench was still there. She'd sit for a while, look around and smile at the people rushing by. She knew that somewhere among them another story was beginning, just like hers once did. Because kindness never disappears. It travels. From one heart to another, from one moment to the next, quietly shaping the world, one stranger at a time.